Welcome to Office Hours by Triple X Church. I'm your host, Carl Thomas. I'm a pastor, certified neurohealth coach, and a guy who frankly struggled with a lot of the stuff we are going to be talking about today for over 20 years until I found freedom about a decade ago. With me is our producer and my good friend Neil, who works with the ministry in a variety of capacities. Today, in this episode, we are going to be jumping in and answering some really interesting questions, such as, how can I get rid of my porn and masturbation addiction? If I'm hooked on porn and masturbation, should I be pursuing a relationship? What can I do about my sexual desires if I can't engage in a real relationship? And what can I do if my wife can't or won't have sex with me for medical reasons? That's just some of what we will be discussing today, so make sure you hang in there and jump into these topics with us. Recognize that no questions are off the table, and I'm going to be as honest and blunt with my answers as I can possibly be. So don't get your feathers ruffled, folks. Without any further delay, let's jump in. Neil, what do you have for us today?
All right, first question. How do I get rid of the addiction?
Okay, well, that's a pretty
It's the shortest
broad
one from today. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the one we get all the time, usually via email. Is, hey, how do I get rid of this stuff? Yeah. So, well, I'm going to give the answers that we always give, but before I do that, let me just say something, because we get these questions often, like I said, either through emails, through social media. Sometimes we get them in the app, the Live Free Community app. And basically, when people are asking questions like this, they're under this misconception that there's some sort of magic bullet that they're missing out on, right? Hey, if you can just give me this secret in this one email message or this one 5-minute whatever, I'll be good. And I wish it was that simple. That's the problem. There is no magic bullet. I mean, there is definitely a process. There are definitely things you need to be doing, but it's not just a simple, hey, if you just give me this one secret, I can beat this thing. And I think that's why so many guys and girls get stuck in this cycle for most of their lives, because they're always moving on from one magic bullet to the next, and it just all fails on them, right? So what can you do to beat or get past your porn addiction? Several things, but the first one and the most important one is get into some community, all right? I believe that 100%. That's what our ministry is all about. We're about putting people or plugging people into supportive communities to help them through this process. Because the reality is this. If you're trying to do this solo, your efforts are going to be very hampered. And that's being nice. I would say probably aren't going to be successful. That's why I've run into guys who have gone to a counselor for, literally 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. And they're still dealing with some of this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, you've been going to a counselor for 10 or 15 years. Haven't you made any progress? Well, yeah. Well, the problem is their community is one. They have a counselor who's paid, who is only their community on the clock 1 hour a week. And you need to have people around you. That's honestly one of the main reasons that we get sucked into this stuff in the first place, because we don't have relationships that are characterized by unconditional love. We don't have those connections. We don't have these things in our life that we need to keep us feeling safe and secure. And so that creates anxiety and problems. And so we go out and turn to things like masturbation and porn to fill that gap and try to get us through the day. So number one, get some community. That's why we have the Live Free Community app for men. We don't have a community for women, but we do have small groups online for both men, women, and spouses. I would also say a counselor is good, okay, because even if you're in community, talking to a layperson, I'm not saying that won't help, but a counselor could help you kind of break through that next level in terms of trying to figure out some of the deeper pain that you're dealing with, that you've been carrying around since you've been a kid, and is, quite frankly, the reason you're doing a lot of this stuff in the first place. A workshop could be good, a good workshop. We have the X3 Pure workshop, but there's other good ones out there. Jay Stringer has a good program. Maybe a good book like Stringer's book or the book Pure Eye. So there's a lot of good resources. So I would say community, resources, and counseling is a resource, but I kind of put it in its own category because I'm going to say not everyone necessarily needs a counselor to find freedom from this thing. I didn't go to a counselor when I found freedom. But at the same time, I would say, hey, everyone needs a counselor at some point. I think a counselor is helpful. I needed a counselor for anxiety, not porn. But when it comes to this thing, you might not need to go the counseling route, but you definitely need some resources in education in terms of trying to understand how this thing works. So you go down those two paths, you're going to be on your way. Again, though, it's not a magic bullet. This takes work, it takes time, it takes patience, it takes commitment. And this could be, I mean, if you've been looking at porn and masturbation for 5, 10, 20 years, don't think it's going to take 5, 10, 20 minutes to get over this thing. It's going to take some time. That doesn't mean if you've been hooked on porn 10 years, it's going to take you 10 years to get unhooked. But it's going to take some time and work. And you just, at the end of the day, you can't skip the work. And that's what everybody wants to do. They want to skip the work. Give me the magic bullet. Give me the magic pill, Matrix. They want the red or blue pill. Right? Give me that and I'm good. No. For those of you who are too young to know what I'm talking about, watch The Matrix. It's a good movie. Anyway, that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, one other thing I would mention too, to add to that, is accountability. Just having somebody that will totally, walk with you, ask you questions, and be there to ask you some of the tough questions and walk with you through this.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, you're right. And I should have probably said accountability specifically. Accountability is a component of community, right? So, but it's not all the same thing, right? You have, sometimes we get people come to us and say, hey, I have an accountability partner. Do I still need an online small group? Or I have a small group. So they're both aspects of community, but they're two different things, and they serve, in many ways, two different purposes. And yeah, you definitely need personal accountability. And personal accountability does not mean, hey, I need a babysitter to call me out when I screw up and scold me. That's not what accountability means. Accountability is, hey, I need someone in my life that I'm going to be honest with, and I'm going to commit to a life of honesty and transparency with, and wherever that goes, it goes, right? So if that means you're just coming alongside and encouraging me, awesome. If that means you're drawing my attention to some areas in my life where maybe I'm a little off and I just don't see it because I got the blinders on, great. And yeah, it might mean calling me out when I'm being a dumbass, right? Sorry, but I'm just saying, like, that's also accountability. Yeah, I was really mad at my wife, but I went and looked at porn last night and jerked off. It's no big deal. I mean, it's kind of her fault. Dude, that's a dumb comment. I'm your accountability partner. I love you. Don't say something stupid like that. There's no excuse for that, right? So it can be all those things, and you definitely need personal accountability, individual accountability. But again, that's a choice, and it's a relationship, and it's definitely an aspect of community. So great point, Neil.
All right, number 2. As a single woman, does my struggle with masturbation and porn mean that I can't or shouldn't think about getting into a relationship? Does it currently disqualify me? What if I'm taking very active steps towards freedom, such as counseling, community, pursuing Jesus, etc.? Does that count for anything?
Yes. So good question. Great question, actually. And I would also, before I say anything, I just want to say the fact that you're asking that question says a lot about you. So that's great, because a lot of people, they're not going to want to hear the answer there necessarily, so they just don't ask the question at all. So whoever asked it, good on you. Also, I'm going to go backwards, start at the end, and say it absolutely counts for anything. Okay, it counts for everything. It's great that you're doing these things. You keep doing them. Definitely counts. Okay, it matters. Now, as far as, well, should I be in a relationship? Does it disqualify me? Blah, blah, blah. Again, we tend to, especially as Christians, I don't know if this person's a Christian. It sounds like they are, obviously. But especially Christians, we tend to fall into this mindset of, hey, I need permission or denial, right? Is it a yes or is it a hard no? And sometimes you get into situations where it's not either. It's more of a matter of what's wise and what's maybe not as wise, right? Or what's just plain old foolish. In this case, I mean, if I told you you should not be in a relationship and date because you struggle with porn and masturbation, and it absolutely disqualifies you from engaging in any sort of, relationship, I'd be the biggest hypocrite in the world, because I dated, got engaged, and got married, right? And quite frankly, most of the guys in our community at Live Free who are married men all fit that bill, right? They all dated, got married, and now they're trying to seek help. I mean, I'm a pastor, but I'm not a Bible scholar. But I will say that as far as I know, I don't think there's anything in the Bible that specifically says thou shalt not pursue a relationship if you're looking at porn, right? It's just not there. However, and this is the hard pill to swallow, is it the best idea? Maybe, possibly, probably not. And the reason is because porn and masturbation, all this stuff, it's messing with your brain. It's kind of jacking up your dopamine levels and things like that. You're trying to get away from this stuff, where you're trying to replace, or you're trying to figure out how to cope with life without sexual methods. And I'm not saying this person's having sex, but romance, relationships, these romantic relationships, sometimes these can kind of serve as a placebo, where it's, hey, it's not the real thing, but this will kind of make me feel good. I mean, I've known guys who they don't look at porn when they're in a relationship, and then when they're out of the relationship, they do look at porn. And of course, the problem is the lack of the relationship. But the bigger problem is, why do you have to be in a relationship not to look at porn, right? So if they spend all their time in a relationship, they never have the motivation to go figure out what it is about the lack of a relationship that drives them to this stuff in the first place, right? And quite frankly, just practically speaking, if your goal is to be with somebody and a relationship matters to you, that might be a little bit of a motivator, right? Hey, I think we're going to hold off on pursuing anything serious until I'm in a better spot. And so that's a powerful motivator. Hey, let me go do what I got to do. Let me get better. Let me pursue counseling and do the things I need to do so I can then get into a great relationship that's meaningful and not have to bring a bunch of baggage in with me. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're bringing in baggage into the relationship. Now, sure, you're working on it, but it's still baggage, right? So I would say this: if you do get into a serious relationship, before it moves on to the next step, you need to have that talk and explain where you're at too. You don't want them to find out after you're married, right? And that goes for women or guys, right? You don't wait to put the ring on and then say, oh, and by the way, I have this lifelong porn and masturbation addiction I've been wrestling with. Surprise. There's your wedding present. Like, you don't do that either. So is it wrong? Is it right? Permission? No permission? I wouldn't even go there. I would just say, hey, man, or whatever. It's probably wiser to put something like that off, pursuing a deep relationship, until you're in a better place. But and if you don't, again, complete honesty as you process through that relationship, so no one's caught off guard, creating a bigger problem down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah, great answer. All right, number 3. My mom is a 62-year-old widow and a Christian. She invited my female cousin, age 35, to live with her last fall. A few months later, my cousin's male friend, age 42, came to visit and decided to never leave. Neither of them pay or have jobs, pay rent, or contribute towards anything in the household or do chores. Also, my mom knows that they're viewing porn when they're at our house. How can I help her understand the depths of depravity they're viewing? She seems to think that anything goes in the name of making others comfortable, so they will be open to Christ, who she doesn't really talk about anyways. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, okay. There's a lot here, and I'm not going to even try to tackle all of it. You have the cousin. I don't know if the cousin's a Christian or not. That would obviously, it doesn't sound like it, right? So let's just assume you have a non-Christian cousin, and then their friend who's also now a housemate, which that one's kind of perplexing, but they're coming in, they're not believers. One thing you do got to understand is if they're coming in from a different worldview than you, there's a good chance that they don't think porn's a big deal, all right? So trying to, they didn't ask this, but trying to approach them on a morality, hey, this is wrong level, you might be going down a dead road if they don't have the same sort of worldview as you, right? They're just going to think you're crazy. As far as living in a house and not paying rent, I don't get involved in domestic situations, but that sounds like a terrible situation. Gosh, they should probably move out and get a job. But regardless, as far as how do you talk to was it grandmom about grandma, right?
Mom.
Okay. So as far as talking to your mom and trying to convince her of the depravity, again, you got to stay away from some of this. Not arguing the term. I'm just saying some of these more judgmental terms aren't going to get you as far. So I don't even know if I would approach it as, hey, Mom, do you realize how sick and evil and twisted this stuff is? I think I would more approach it as, hey, Mom, I understand you're trying to, it's called Judy, right? I understand you're trying to show Judy and her friend, Joe, right? You're trying to show them Christ's love, and so you're not kicking them out, even though they're not contributing. That's between you and them. But they're watching porn while they're here. And that's not good for anyone, especially me. We need to have boundaries. And so just tell them, hey, you don't need to come down on them and just say, hey, look, when you're in our house, don't be watching porn, because my son and I, we don't want to have that stuff on our computers. We don't want to be dealing with it. So just encourage your mom to set some strong boundaries. You don't even need to get into the holiness of it all. Just, Mom, they're watching porn on our computers and they're not paying any rent. That's not cool. Just draw a boundary there, Mom, right? As far as the last comment of trying to show them Christ's love by just accommodating everything, no, there's two different things there. You can love somebody without enabling them, right? So if you're letting them watch porn on your computers and your TVs all the time in the interest of showing them Christ's love, that's not love, that's enablement. Okay? Sorry. Christians especially, and it's not that I'm bashing on because I'm a Christian, but most of the ones I've met throughout the course of my life, usually we have a really hard time with this idea. It's either we're super judgmental and condemning, or we're super affirming and everything's cool, right? Because I don't want to dare turn them off to Jesus, so I'm just going to give them the thumbs up on everything. And no, you don't have to be on both extremes, right? You can accept without affirm, right? So, hey, I love you. I understand that's something you do on your own time, whatever. But it's not cool in our house, and I have to ask, if you're going to stay here, you just don't do it. Sorry. And as simple as that. So keep that whole conversation to a boundaries perspective. And again, you can love without enabling or without affirming, right? You can just accept. Hey, I accept the fact that you see things differently than me. I accept the fact that your views on sexuality are different than us. I still love you. We can agree to disagree. But at the end of the day, you're in our house. So you need to abide by our rules. Simple as that.
Yeah, boundaries are so important.
Absolutely.
Had to learn that the hard way myself. All right, number 4. I'm a 23-year-old male who was saved from the LGBTQ. I accept that homosexuality is a sin, and I have come to be celibate. But what do I do about my sexual desires? How do I remain sexless entirely? Is that possible, to just never touch myself again? I live with guilt, shame, depression, anxiety, and a lack of interest in loving Jesus because I feel he is disgusted by me.
Another multifaceted question. All right. So without even getting into the whole LGBTQ conversation, all right, for this person, they've already decided, hey, this is something that God does not like, and I've been saved from it. Good. All right. That's fine. Okay. The issue here is, how do I think he doesn't say it in so many words, but I think the assumption here is, hey, I still have sexual thoughts about the same sex. I don't want to act on them, so I'm just going to go masturbate instead to relieve myself, right? And that's the assumption. And whether this is a homosexual gay thing, or whether it's the fact that you're talking about your wife, or you're a single dude who's just really horny and you want to have sex with your girlfriend, but you're not going to, so you're going to go home and jack off. Like, at the end of the day, it's all the same thing, right? It's this idea of, hey, I don't want to step across the line, so I'm going to get as close to the line as possible. And it's this, again, misconception that, well, for some reason, if I keep it digital, it's not the same thing. Okay. Now, practically speaking, and I understand the whole verse on, hey, all sins are the same to God. I understand that whole argument. Okay. That's not exactly what God means by that. But practically speaking, is it better to masturbate than go sleep with your neighbor? I would say I would rather, if I had my options, if you came to me and said, hey, A or B, I'd say, yeah, go with A, right? I think if someone went to Jesus back in the day and said, hey, you remember that verse where you talked about, if I hate somebody, it's just like killing them. Can I just go kill them now because I hate them? I'm pretty sure Jesus was, no, dude, slow your roll here. Okay. That's not exactly what I was saying. Okay. So yes, you're not acting out. That's good. But the idea of, well, if I masturbate, can I do that? Like, how? Like, that's the issue. It's like, why do you need to go masturbate? Now, yes, sex. It's not a need as in water or food or shelter, right? It's not an essential need. You can survive without sex. I understand that we want sex, but my hunch here is that you're probably looking for something more than sex, which is what most people are looking for when they're turning to porn and masturbating. They just don't realize it. You're looking for connection. You're looking for some sort of relationship, right? And so you feel lonely. Hey, I can't pursue, assuming this is a guy, I can't pursue these other men. I can't get a relationship. And so I'm feeling empty. And so I'm going to turn to masturbation. And it's kind of like what we tell guys when they come to us with our small groups. We have groups just for guys that struggle with SSA, same-sex attraction. And we get some guys that come in a group and they're like, hey, I'm here to become ungay, or hey, look, just because you have same-sex attraction does not mean you're gay. It means you have a same-sex attraction. There's a lot of reasons for that. We're here to help you with your unwanted sexual behavior, whatever that looks like. All right? And same thing here. We want to help you with your unwanted sexual behavior, whatever that looks like. Whether it's you're thinking about men or you're thinking about women, at the end of the day, you're chronically masturbating and trying to seek out you're acting out sexually, and that's what you need help with. And it's the same thing. I mean, you got to do, it's all the stuff I talked about in the first question. Seeking community, getting help, figuring out why you got to masturbate all the time. Sometimes we talked about this, I think, last week or maybe a couple weeks ago, but the whole idea of hypersexuality, well, I'm just horny all the time. Well, there's a reason that you think you're horny all the time. I'm not saying that we don't have sexual desires or needs, but you shouldn't walk around wanting sex all the time. If you're walking around wanting sex all the time, there's probably something off there, right? So, and the last thing he said, I just want to stress to him that, this idea of, hey, I have a hard time feeling close to God because I think he's disgusted with me. That's not true. God loves us regardless of the baggage we carry. And reality is, and I've told this to other guys before who've come to me and said similar things, the reason we feel distant from God when we're struggling with certain things is not because he's pulled back from us, it's because we pull back from him, right? We feel unworthy, we feel shameful, we feel dirty, we feel unacceptable, so we withdraw from him. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's like, no, I'm still here. Stop pulling away, just come closer. But we pull away. So, we need to work on that too, right? This idea of, hey, I can't come to God because I'm somehow super jacked up. No, he knows all your baggage, and he still loves you, right? So, yeah, he accepts you. He's not going to condone it, right? Or whatever you want to call it, but he still accepts you and loves you. So That's all I got on that one, man.
Yeah, that was good. It was good. All right, number 5. I do struggle with online lust. I gave my life to Christ in 2001, got baptized a few months later, but I've never overcome my addiction to porn, and I'm really thinking about giving up my phone without internet, but not sure if that would help. I'm 54, still single, and I believe today that God's plan for me is to be alone. See, I have a learning disability and a lack of social skills, and I don't understand how to connect or to stay away from people because they make it very clear they don't want me around them. I know when I'm in the Bible and I'm praying and I'm worshiping, my footsteps are lighter and I know that I'm stronger. But sooner or later, I always fall short. And when I fall hard off a cliff. Can you help me?
Yes. All right. So, gosh, which one do we want to tackle here? Which part of this question do we want to tackle here first? Let's just jump to the middle. Because I think that sets the stage for everything else. He talks about his learning disabilities and the fact that he feels rejected and people can't accept him for who he is. And I'm assuming that learning disability is a lifelong thing, right? It didn't just pop up when you're 20. So you've gone through a lifetime of rejection, of feeling marginalized, of all these things that contribute to a horrendous shame recipe. Right? So not feeling accepted, not feeling loved, not feeling affirmed. All these things are classic examples of why we go to things like porn and masturbation or drugs or alcohol or whatever. This is why we do this stuff. Because we don't have these things, because we feel terrible about ourselves. Now, Jay Stringer would argue one of the things is sometimes we go to porn to reaffirm to ourselves the idea that, yeah, we really are that bad a person. Right? Either way, some call it medication, whatever. At the end of the day, it creates a tension in us. That's the bottom line. It creates a tension, right? We want connection. We either don't feel worthy of connection or we don't know how to deal with the fact that we're apparently not worthy of connection either. It creates a tremendous tension in us. And rather than dealing with the tension, we go do something to alleviate it, which is porn and masturbation, maybe prostitutes, whatever, right? So that's the first thing. And that is honestly the most important aspect of all of this is that shame, that lack of connection, that lack of acceptance that you're carrying around, because that drives everything else. So going back to the beginning of the question, I've been thinking about adding a porn blocker. Dude, don't waste your time. Not saying that filters and blockers don't have a role. I'm not saying you don't put one on your kid's phone. I'm not even saying that you can't use one in a healthy way if you want. Sometimes what I say to guys is, hey, Carl, would a porn blocker help? Well, it depends why you're using it. If you're using it because you think that's just a way of passing the decision-making on to AI, and so I don't have to deal with it, that's not going to help you very long, right? Because sooner or later, it's going to fail you or you're going to fail it. If you're using it as a way to just simplify your decision making every day, hey, if I have something filtering out stuff on Google Images or on my search results so I don't have to see a link that I kind of want to click, that's okay, right? That's, for me, I usually, when I talk about this stuff with other guys, I usually use the example of myself with fitness and potato chips. Like, I don't keep potato chips in the house all the time because if I did, every time I walk by the pantry, I'm going to grab a couple, right? Because they're just good. And then before you know it, I ate a half a sleeve of hers, right? Or no, not hers, Pringles, right? Like, me not keeping Pringles in the house is not what's going to keep me in shape. But, yeah, simplify your decision making each and every day. So if you want to download a filter or whatever to simplify your decision making, okay, fine. But if you're going to download it because you think that's the solution, don't waste your time. You're gonna hit a dead end real hard, just like you said at the end of your question, right? And going back to now, let's go all the way to the end of the question. When I'm doing, the things he listed, I feel pretty good, but then eventually, it always catches up with me. That's a term in recovery, you call white knuckling, right? So you're You're hanging in there. You're doing this. You're doing that. You're resisting. You're resisting. You're resisting. Sooner or later, your hands give out, right? You can only hold up. You can only be hanging so long before your arms give out. And so the white knuckle idea is that the blood's leaving your knuckles and turning them white because it's all flowing down your arm. That's the idea of white knuckling. So yeah, of course you're failing constantly. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means that you're going about trying to beat this thing in all the wrong ways. And bring this full circle, it all comes back to their first thing, which is the acceptance, the rejection, the shame you carry, these sorts of things. And those all go back to the first question of this episode. Hey, how do I get free of this stuff? Well, you need some community. You need people that are going to accept you for who you are. You need to, probably pursue some counseling. You need some education. You need some accountability. You need these things. And that's going to help you move forward. Okay, but just going about doing the same thing, what's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results, right? But that's what we're doing here. And adding a filter to mix is not going to be your magic bullet. Okay, it's just a tool, but it's a tool that can easily let you down.
So true. So true. All right, we got number 6. Because of health issues, my wife is no longer able to have sex. She's 67 and I'm 69. The problem is that I still have urges that have led to porn and masturbation. I suppose my only option is celibacy. I bought her a vibrator 6 months ago, but she still has not opened the package. I have suggested non-penetration sex, but she keeps changing the subject. I don't know what else to do, if anything.
Wow, okay, well, that's the first time the vibrator word came up on this podcast.
Yeah,
So.
First time I heard it here.
Great deal. We got a first. Mm-hmm. And let me just say, hey, still looking to rock it in your 60s? Good on you. All right, that's great. Very, very happy for you. I'm hoping I'm rocking it in my 60s, my late 60s. But in all seriousness, now he doesn't say what the medical issue is. The most common one, and I'm not an expert on this by any stretch, but the most common one you hear about is vaginismus, which is basically it's where the muscles are spasming, usually at the thought of penetration or your body's anticipating it, so your muscles spasm, and then when you try to do it, you try to have sex, it creates intense pain, right? Vaginismus is definitely treatable. It's something that you can absolutely come through, but and there's therapy. There's all these different things that you got to do. There's exercises you can do. She would probably need a professional to kind of walk her through some of that stuff. So if it's vaginismus, it's definitely rectifiable. That being said, the question is, well, she doesn't seem interested in talking about it. Going back several episodes, maybe it's because we're approaching the question, maybe you're approaching the topic the wrong way. And what I mean by that is maybe the way you're coming at this topic is pushing her away on it, right? To her, this is something that creates pain for me. I don't really know if I want it. And you're coming at her with this very one-dimensional, it sounds like, view of sex where it's just all about penetration and orgasm. It's like, hey, babe, we got to do it. If you can't do it with me, here's a vibrator. Like, how's that? Like, what? Like, that should not be the solution is, well, here's a vibrator. Okay, well, can we come up with a half a dozen other ways that we could have sex, or basically another half a dozen ways that I can get satisfied without penetration? Like, again, if that's the way, and I'm not saying it is, but it sounds like if that's the way you're coming at it, it's very one way. That's the way she's going to read it. Hey, this guy just wants to ejaculate, and this causes me pain. He doesn't seem too worried about that. So, yeah, I have no desire to pursue this stuff with you. Like, this is a real thing for me. And if there was more of the intimacy that we talk about and the connection aspects to this, right? Hey, babe, it's not about orgasm or penetration, but how can we just make sure that we're growing more closer together intimately, right? Maybe it's hand-holding and non-sexual touch, right? If you invested your time and effort in trying to build the intimacy side of things, Then maybe she comes back around and says, hey, you know what? I really enjoy this time with my husband. I would like to take this further. This is in my way. Let's go see a professional and talk about it, right? All that to be said, we say this every episode to somebody. The fact that you're not getting it is not a good reason or legitimate excuse to be looking at porn and masturbating. Hey, my wife is vaginismus. She won't have sex with me. She won't use my the vibrator I bought her. So I should just be able to go masturbate and look at porn. Nope. Doesn't work like that, right? And that also is going to make it worse, right? If she knows that you're going to that as your substitute for the real thing, dude, that's just going to piss her off even more. She's going to be so out on this whole idea when you come there and say, hey, can we work on this? No, I have no desire to work on this, right? So I would work on the approach. Focus on the intimacy, focus on the connection, focus on expressing the fact that you care about her comfort and you care about her pleasure, and you just want to make sure that you guys are connecting on a very emotional and intimate level. And yeah, maybe get a professional in at some point and you can get there, but it's not going to be like most things we talk about. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to require patience, and it's also going to require a lot of love and compassion, right? Just loving her for who she is with no exceptions. No expectations, no demands. That's hard, but that's what we're supposed to do. So,
absolutely. That was the last question.
Okay. Wow. Well, this one, there was a lot of doozies.
Yeah.
So hopefully we don't generate too much negative mail. Anyway. All right, buddy. Well, thanks very much, Neil. Hopefully, how's the neck coming along, by the way? Is it starting to heal up
along
good? Or?
Yeah, I got stitches and staples out yesterday. Things are getting better.
Good. All right. Well, thanks. Thank you, folks, for listening or watching. And as always, if you heard anything in this episode that interests you, especially if you're on YouTube, leave a comment, right? And we will get back to you. Or better yet, go to triplexchurch.com/office hours. That's office-hours. And submit your own question, and we will answer it on the air. And that's it. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we will see you next week.